Morning all. I've had a rather heated debate on a recent Blitz video where I played an IM on the ICC on a 5-minute game. Now the ICC do show FIDE titles which actually do relate to one-day chess, not Blitz. So beating an IM or a GM or an FM or a WGM, even if you're not titled, this is much more possible on a 5-minute game than a longer game. It's much easier, usually, statistically. But I've touched on earlier in the year how I tried to use an idea of access paths to longer time control, even though it helped on 5-minute games. And I found it didn't help at all, actually. It was pretty disastrous in a longer over-the-board time control. Beyond over-the-board, there's also correspondence-style chess. Now, in each of these forms of chess, there are different skill sets at work, and so a successful strategy, say on correspondence chess, might not be that successful, say on a bullet game at the extreme. In bullet chess, setting problems and sometimes winning quickly is a requirement. If you're in a tournament where it's you get the new game as soon as you finish one game, obviously you want to win quickly. So the whole time control, the whole context determines the requirements of the game, and therefore any strategies which are really successful in one context might not be at all successful in another context because there's different requirements at work. So here in this 5-minute game against Martinez Bra, the thing is he also had a huge 5-minute auto pairing rating of 2449 to my 2293. So I played the King's Engine Defence, and believe it or not, just to illustrate my point, in correspondence chess, especially if you go to engine assisted correspondence chess, which most people think is not a valid game at all because you're just relying on the computers. Some people in that argue, well, actually they're just another tool. My site chessbowl.net steered away from engine assisted correspondence chess, but the point here is that even the King's Engine Defence as a decision might be questionable in high level correspondence chess. You might want a more solid opening with the potential for less, say, structural weaknesses. So as I say, each time control has these requirements where you question the skill set and the openings as well. They're tailored for the requirements of that time control. So when you see, say, people say, oh, Blitz is a really bad habit for your longer game, you're going to ruin your longer game. Well, actually it's like, you know, golf has one-day golf and it has the long, or cricket, sorry, mini golf, or the big golf, or cricket as one-day cricket, pardon me. So there are different forms of the same game which require different requirements, different skill sets, different approaches to apply your chess knowledge and see how it fits in with the requirements. One thing is also interesting to consider that I've tried to highlight on the channel, that actually there are certain aspects of 5-minute games which do stand up to longer time controls, like the importance of checking for forcing moves and variations is important on longer over-the-board games, and definitely on correspondence games. It's all taken for granted. Basic calculations of forcing move sequences, weaknesses of the last move can win games in Blitz, can win games in one-day games, as I've mentioned when I've been annotating one-day games. Now openings, yes, I mean we see a lot of the grandmasters nowadays against d4 not playing the King's Engine Defence. Is it out of fashion? It used to be more fashionable in the 70s, in the 60s and 70s. Nowadays, you know, there's been a lot of lines analysed and ways for white to achieve a good position, and it's gone out of favour for most GMs. They're playing the Slav or the Groomfield, it seems, at the moment. Those are the two most popular, and that's also this new requirement of the new age of information sharing and the internet and databases, that openings change, opening trends change historically, even on the same time control. But historically, if you go back to the Romantic era of chess, the King's Gambit was really popular. And if you look at chessgames.com database, statistically the King's Gambit is doing better than knight f3 on the second move. So not only do you have different time control contexts, you know, the historical point we're in also is an influence. All these external factors, you know, if people are booked up and they know, for example, a refutation of a certain variation of Sicilian, then there's no point playing that anymore. There might have been a point, say in the 70s, the Benoni was thought to be busted with this line at Kasparov against none, with an early f4 and bishop b5 check. Anyway, in this game, a commentator was talking about how I weakened c7 structurally. In the King's Engine, a lot of work was done by players like Bronstein on the King's Engine, having like a weakness on d6. In the Sicilian, a lot of Russians like Boleslavsky, the Boleslavsky hole in the Sicilian, again, structural weaknesses in the 70s in openings weren't sort of the end of the line for investigation. It was the beginning to see, you know, where counterplay existed. Now, let's check this game out more technically in the second pass. Yes, c6 is a target. I've got a structural weakness here, but in terms of backward pawns, what happened in this game? White's also got a potentially backward pawn, and I had noted this in the live commentary video that there was actually a master game in the Classic where the current world champion Anand against Adams had a similar, well, an analogous pawn structure. And d5 seemed to be a bit of a hole, but sometimes it's not that easy to exploit structural weaknesses. And here, okay, c7 is a target on the c file, but are there dynamic mitigating circumstances? And especially for this time control in correspondence, especially, let's take the extreme engine assisted correspondence. Would you want to have any structural weaknesses when the engines can neutralize the dynamic counterplay with, say, a move which is 1 in 100? They'll neutralize your dynamic counterplay, and yes, you'll lose because of structural weaknesses. That's taken for granted. Also, I thought that the circumstances of different time controls, or the tools you're allowed to use even, will dictate your openings, your style of play, and obviously your legal use of tools or otherwise is dictated by where you're playing. A lot of people in the past have also said that actually it's not over the board chess that is real chess, as this YouTube commentator was saying, but rather correspondence chess used to be considered as the purest form of chess because it was more blunder free. If you play, for example, in a club game in the evening, people are often tired and blundering, and there's also approaching the time control. Statistically, you'll find in over the board most blunders occur right before the time control, or sometimes even after the time control. People will relax because they feel they have more time, and that they relax somehow, and sometimes there's even a blunder after, but usually it's before a time control. So to say that over the board chess hasn't got a bias of clock pressure, the clock is an external influence to the actual game position, but to achieve the truth in chess you really need computers investigating far more critically and cynically all the resources contained in positions. And I suspect you'll find that the dynamic openings are no longer playable if the dynamics can be taken out, and you're simply left with structural weaknesses. But on faster time controls you can play things like gambits, you can have structural weaknesses, and even on, you know, in club games, because you're playing against a human who can crack under pressure, who can blunder. The clock is an element of the game. Here my opponent went to win a pawn, my IM opponent, who did have a higher 5-minute rating as well. So he's won a pawn, and technically it looks to be a winning position. He should maybe just retreat the bishop, simple as that. But he left this nasty pin, a one-move blunder here, maybe relaxing after winning a pawn, and also is trying to win another pawn with this next move, f4, because if the knight retreats, then there's bishop takes f7, winning yet another pawn, end of game. So he thought it will be end of game, just leave the bishop on d5. But as Bronstein has said many times, you know, you can do a lot with when it's your turn to move. And here, rook c8, I don't need to necessarily respond to the immediate threat. I can create a threat of my own. And it so happens now that the bishop's tactically vulnerable. The c file and that rank is very nice for me tactically. I'm winning a piece, as it turns out, it seems. But we'll check this in the second pass. But really, yes, I'm having a rant video here. I have to, because I am just you know, wondering why people think chess has to be restricted to one form of chess. Why isn't bullet chess, for example, a valid form of chess? Why isn't 5-minute chess? You know, why would people think correspondence chess is the ideal? It's, you know, it's to do with blundering often. The reason is, you know, technical precision blunders the truth that we consider the truth in human eyes. But you know, the truth in human eyes is only really a limited perception of the game that we have with our limited, you know, calculation abilities. And we have a constant flux, say, of opening theory, of ideas through the ages, how openings go in and out of fashion, how refutations are sometimes found. So, okay, I'm a piece up and I consolidated within the time control. So anyway, he also then further blundered his pawns, one there and then one here. The nature of 5-minute. He was already probably frustrated. Okay. We can engine check this game, and people say, why bother? Why bother analysing 5-minute games? They're full of blunders. That's true. That's true. But for the sake of argument, let's see, was black actually busted because of the structural weakness? That's what I'd like to determine. If one can seek permission for structural weakness, which I think one can in 5-minute, but is it as bad as sometimes it might appear? Here, it seems black's okay. Technically, at a certain depth, and this is the truth at that certain depth, yes, you can leave the engine on overnight if you want to achieve much better depth, get much bigger hardware to achieve an even greater truth of the position here, that this backward c-pawn, wow, this structural weakness, is it really losing? Is it a lost position? We've got a backward pawn. What about white's backward pawn? What about this diagonal when b4 happens? Dynamic piece pressure needs to be factored in. As I say, dynamic piece pressure is why systems will continue to be investigated, which initially would seem shocking, would seem outrageous to have, say, backward pawns or structural weaknesses. Here the advantage of white, well, after queen c2, which appears to be a tiny inaccuracy, doesn't seem a big deal. c6, when we're talking less than half a pawn, okay, here more than half pawn. Okay, white was doing okay. Yes. And now bishop c5 appears to be a slight inaccuracy. Rook e8, a terrible inaccuracy. So knight d7 apparently. And the advantage is kept minimal. So what out of interest is going on here? If we take here, bishop takes f8. For some reason in this position, black is less than half a pawn. I think it's to do with winning e2 if the knight retreats, and black has some compensation. So there are amazing resources in chess, and this is why I think chess is this life adventure. No human is ever going to master the game. Magnus Carlsen, he's going to be blundering. In even his most brilliant games, engines will probably pick up inaccuracies all the time. So here, yes, white was doing well, and now it seems that f4 was the howler move. Other moves, a4 even, whatever that does, it kicks the rook, it's a forcing move, and now b4, and that's the end of the counterplay, and the bishop on c5 is solid. But no, the opponent blunders, and all of a sudden I'm back to being equal here, it seems. Rook c8. And now another howler, complete howler, because apparently this is not entirely losing this position. What does white have here? Bishop c4. So I might have equalised, and that should have been it. But no, a complete howler I think here, and all of a sudden, okay. that's the nature of 5-minute chess. 5-minute chess has this requirement that you need to play within that time control, and you can sometimes make terrible blunders as a result. Does that mean it's not a legitimate form of chess? As I say, over the board chess, especially towards time controls, has blunders. Look at the statistics of blunders and inaccuracies. It doesn't approach chess really as a science. You can go to one-day games instead of club games, and yes, you can even have Fisher increment clocks. You can promote classical accuracy, high accuracy chess if you give people more time, and you'll find maybe sometimes dynamic openings that they're not that successful. Maybe sometimes you find they are, because even in one-day chess it's hard to prepare for every opening under the sun. So sometimes when people play offbeat openings, sometimes they do get results in one-day games. And it also depends not just on openings, of course, your general resourcefulness. We've seen Nakamura play all sorts of openings recently, even the King's Gambit last year at the London Classic. So anyway, I hope there's something in this rant video about different time controls. I thought it was justified given the recent heated debate on this game with someone on YouTube. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube, and enjoy all forms of chess. I think they are all legitimate. Even if you enjoy just solving puzzles, that's fine. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.